An average commuter in Nigeria today is feeling the heat of the ongoing armed conflicts between the United States of America, Israel, and Iran. While the war is raging on in the Middle East, the transport fare for an average passenger in Nigeria is on the rise. For instance, those that used to commute between Ajah Junction and Balogun Market are paying today 1,200 naira, sometimes 1,500 instead of 900 to 1,000 naira they used to pay before the escalation of this crisis. Similarly, those commuting with Danfo Yellow Bus used to pay about 1,000 naira from Ikorodu Garage Market to CMS, but today they are paying up to 1,500 naira, depending on the time of the day. Unless you bought BRT bus, which still maintains 1,000 naira flat rate. Those using ride-hailing taxis, maybe you are booking your ride from Ikoyi to Lekki Phase 1 or Lekki Phase 2, you will be alarmed by the rates presented to you on the app. Those in Abuja, if you used to commute from Nyanya to Central Business Districts, now you are paying up to 1,300 naira instead of 700 naira that you used to pay. The same thing goes with commuters from Wuse 2 to Bejad Bridge. They used to pay about 300 naira and 400 naira, but today the passengers are paying 500 to 600 naira. In Enugu, from Popular Holy Ghost to Abapa used to cost passengers 500 naira, but now they are paying over 700 naira. In Jos, if you are commuting from Buruku to Secretariat Junction, you are paying over 500 naira instead of 400 naira that you used to pay. In Port Harcourt, those that used to board minibus from Rumola Junction to Choba are paying 1,300 naira today. But before the escalation of the crisis, they used to pay 1,000 naira. So that is how badly the Middle East crisis is affecting an average commuter in Nigeria. If you ask the driver, why am I paying this high? The driver will explain that it is because of hike in the fuel pump price. What leads to hike in the fuel pump price? It is because of the Iranian-US Israeli conflicts in the Middle East. So how does this affect Nigeria while the epicenter of the crisis is in the Middle East? Yes, it affects Nigeria because of the tension building around the Strait of Hormuz. Over 20% of the movement of crude oil passes through this tiny strait. 20% translates to 20 million of barrels of crude oil a day. Imagine the slowdown in the supplies of this quantity of crude oil. It means production will be stifled in most of the refineries using Brent crude oil because most of the industries affected by the lack of supplies of crude oil are those using Brent. Before now, Brent used to cost $68 per barrel, but today it is over $100 per barrel, breaching the international benchmark. When the price of Brent is high, other grades of crude oil also adjust their prices. The price of Brent, which is the international benchmark, determines other prices of crude oil, because the Brent is no longer in supply. Therefore, other industries turn their attention to alternative grade of crude oil. As a result, the demand becomes higher and the price also increases to commensurate with the demand. For example, the price of WTI, that is West Texas Intermediate in the United States of America, is on the rise as of today because of the high demand, because other refineries consider it alternative to the Brent. So that is why the price is high, and therefore the refineries, because of the higher amount of money they have to pay to procure this crude oil, they also increase the price for the marketers. And at the end of the day, it is the end user, the commuter, that will pay for the extra cost. Dangote Refinery, which is the primary supplier of petroleum products in Nigeria, is also adding up price because of the cost in procuring crude oil from the United States of America and Brazil. Yes, Nigeria has oil, but Dangote also buys from USA and Brazil because the locally sourced bonillite from the NNPCL is not enough for the production of petroleum products that can meet the domestic needs. Dangote expects about 13 cargoes from the NNPCL per month, but it is reported that it hardly gets up to half of this quantity. Therefore, the refinery has to turn its attention to international suppliers of crude oil. For example, WTI from the United States and Topi from Brazil. So Dangote will get these grades of oil from the Americas through transatlantic routes down to its offshore terminal, from where this volume of crude oil supplies will be channeled via subsea to Lekki Free Trade Zone. So that is how Dangote transports oil down to Nigeria, and the extra cost leads to the pump price increase, which in turn affects the common man, the common passenger in Nigeria. The second reason why the fuel pump price skyrockets in recent times as a result of the crisis in the Middle East is the war risk premium slammed by the global insurance companies on the very large crude carriers. In times of global instability, most of the global insurance companies charge higher premiums on ships. What used to cost $250,000 now is over $450,000. And in this case, the crude oil tanker management passes these extra costs onto the refineries. And the increase in these landing costs translates to the increase in fuel pump price, which at the end of the day affects the common commuter. If Dangote pays higher logistic fees to the very large crude carrier, it will also add cost plus Marketers as well will increase the price so that they can be able to meet up with replacement costs, because the amount of money that you use to purchase fuel today will increase tomorrow if you want to replenish your stock. So in this case, the price keep on increasing from about 800 naira per liter to 1,300 naira and 1,500 naira. The third reason the pump price skyrockets in the recent times as a result of the war in the Middle East is because of low supply of chemical additives used by the refineries to produce crude oil into fuel. The supplies are no longer as it used to be because of the tension around the Strait of Hormuz. These chemicals are part of the petroleum refining process. The raw material used in refining crude oil into fuel is not 100% crude oil. Refineries use chemical additives to complete this process. So when these ingredients are missing, it slows down production. If they look out for these chemical additives from elsewhere, they do so at additional cost, which is passed down to the marketers, who in turn pass down to the commercial motorists, who ensure that they make profit by also increasing the transport fare for an ordinary commuter. So that is the chain of increase as a result of what is happening in the Middle East. So the longer the crisis in the Middle East lingers, the longer the passengers will continue to pay higher transport fare